Okay, we are live, and this is Craig Watts, Utah Mandarin Families, and we are on our second parent school snapshot, and our guest today is Emily Cottam, who is she's got kids at Calvin Smith Elementary. So Emily, if you'd maybe just introduce yourself, and then the first question that I had that I wanted to jump into was telling us about your family, your journey in Mandarin, like why you enrolled your kids and how that's gone. So go ahead and take it away.
So I have two kids currently in the Mandarin Chinese program at Calvin Smith. One is in 2nd grade and one is in 6th grade. When my husband graduated from his residency, we moved back up here so he could start a practice. And the neighborhood that we were in staying, they had the Mandarin program. So we asked a lot about it and looked into it. I have a nephew in a Spanish immersion program, and they seem to like that. So we enrolled our oldest in kindergarten and at that school, and so we applied for the Mandarin in the first grade, and she was accepted, and so we started that journey, and we moved to Delaware for a year, and we made sure that we could find a school that had the Mandarin Chinese immersion program as well, and we were lucky to find one. Their oldest grade was 1 year older than my daughter's current grade. So when she was in 4th grade, we were in Delaware, and my youngest was in kindergarten. Back in Delaware, it's an all-day kindergarten, and so they start the Chinese program in kindergarten. And that's kind of our journey. And then we moved back and started back up at the same school, Calvin Smith. So my daughter is currently in 6th grade, and my youngest is in 2nd grade. And we've really enjoyed Calvin Smith.
And so you were in Delaware for a year or two, or how long were you there?
We were in Delaware for a year. So when my oldest was in 4th grade, and then my youngest was in kindergarten.
And the reason, like you said, was you just was there any Chinese background for you or your husband, or it was just that you were interested in language and the Spanish was an option and you chose Chinese?
Yeah, we were looking at the gifted programs. We were looking at the different immersion programs because we felt like she needed something a little more challenging. And so the Chinese program popped up, and we thought, you know what? We like the Chinese program because we feel like a lot of the kids are going to start at the same level with knowing no Chinese. Whereas my nephew had a hard time because the Spanish program, there's a lot of kids who speak Spanish at home. And so he was very far behind for the first 2 years because most of the other kids in his class. So we thought, all right, let's try Chinese and hopefully let everyone start at the same level, which has been a great blessing because the whole class has improved together instead of some being left behind and the other half progressing.
Sure. So you've done 1st grade twice at Calvin Smith, is that right? So your daughter was at Calvin Smith in 1st grade, and then your son last year was in 1st grade.
Yeah, I have 2 daughters. So yeah,
we did daughters. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, we did 1st grade 2 years with 2 different girls here. So.
And can you tell us? So when your 6th grader was in 1st grade, what was the situation? Was it 1 class, 2? How many students? And then when your younger daughter, how has it changed? Has it been steady, or numbers, classes? How many classes? That kind of thing.
Okay, so there are 2 immersion classes, so they spend half of the day in Chinese and the other half in English. There are 2 classes that they switch. It's always been 2 classes. They're pretty full. Calvin Smith is one of the top ones, and so we have a big waiting list, and so it's at the max each year. It starts at 30 for in each class, and so both of them started with 30 kids.
And like with your daughter who's in 6th grade now, some people are going to move away and lose some numbers. How steady have they held numbers there? Like for the 6th grade, is 2 classes of 30, or it's dropped?
No, it's dropped. So right now her Chinese class in 6th grade is 22 in person, and then there's 3 in each class that are online. So it's about 25. So they've only really dropped about 5 kids per class. So 10 kids total.
Have they had some move in, or it just doesn't happen? Because they say a lot of times it's hard for someone to move in, say 3rd, 4th grade if they haven't had Chinese background. But have you had some come in that speak Chinese, or is it pretty much the same kids in 1st grade we're seeing in 6th grade?
It's pretty much the same kids. There have been a few kids that have moved from different immersion schools that have moved in, but they're pretty strict as if you don't start it in first grade, then you can't start it later on. So it's been
Right.
a steady, maybe 23 kids, and then maybe we've had about 4 or 5 come in from different states or from different programs here in Utah.
Okay. And then another question about, so there's an English track as well at Calvin Smith. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there
Yes.
2 classes in each grade that are the English side?
Yes. So each class has 2 classes. 2 years ago, there was 3 English classes in the 6th grade class because that was an extra big year. But currently, right now, it's 2 English classes in every grade and 2 Chinese classes in every grade.
And is there an issue of connecting the students across, or helping the students who are not in Chinese not feel left out, or what kinds of things are going on at Calvin Smith to sort of bridge that gap? Is it working out okay, or is it kind of an issue? And straight up talk is what we like. So yeah, I know.
Part of it, last year they really tried to help the younger kids kind of integrate with the English kids, and so all of our class parties before COVID hit was with all of the classes. So we would mix up the kids, all first graders, and then they would move from classroom to classroom and do different types of parts of the party. And that was one way they were trying to help integrate all of the kids, because yeah, there have been issues. There have been parents just saying, hey, the best teachers go into the Chinese program because they only have to teach so many subjects instead of the whole day. They're teaching double of the same. So a lot of the better teachers want to say, hey, I'd like that schedule where I don't have to plan the whole day. I can plan a half day and do it twice.
Right. I mean, the downside of that is you're going to probably get more students, right? Those teachers, and have to coordinate with another teacher. But the sense is at Calvin Smith that maybe teachers prefer to be the English side of a Chinese immersion program instead of doing the straight English. So it's attracting good teachers, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And are the non-Chinese students learning some Chinese? Like I used to teach at Cascade and they had a specialties class in Chinese that would go to the non-English class. Is there anything like that going on, or is it just kind of do your own thing?
No, not right now. They do try and do like Chinese New Year. They try and celebrate, have the entire school learn a little bit about the Chinese culture. We do have some great clubs that any of the English and the Chinese immersion kids can join. We have, except for this year because of COVID, but we have a Chinese Lionhead dance club, and they go in. It's usually about 3/4 Chinese immersion kids, and then about a quarter that are the English kids, and they learn the Chinese dance. They've done dances for the governor this up at the state capitol, and so that helps them, at least the English kids, get somewhat involved, at least in the Chinese culture.
Right. So the clubs, is that kind of parent initiated or school initiated, or can you tell us more about the clubs that are going on? That sounds like something cool.
Yeah, one of our reading specialists used to be a 6th grade teacher, and he was teaching English, and he wanted to get the kids more involved, and so he started a lot of the clubs. Normally we have several different types of clubs, after school clubs, and they really try and integrate the immersion and non-immersion kids. And I think that's been the best part. And then we have parent volunteers. We usually have at least 2 teachers that advise the program. And he has like a Lego League going on, the Chinese Lionhead dance. He has a maker space, which is like a STEM club. And then a lot of the older kids have been able to teach and tutor some of the younger kids if they need assistance.
So in terms of Chinese language, like the tutoring would be that, but say the Lego Club and the Lion Dance, those things are in English, is that right? But it's kind of Chinese culture? Okay.
Yeah, they're in English. They focus more on the culture side than the actual language. So sometimes in Makerspace, they'll let the kids learn a few Chinese characters, like for Valentine's or some of the holidays, they'll make some, but it doesn't focus as much on the language as more trying to get the kids working together.
That kind of dovetails in with the next question, which is how motivated are the students in learning Chinese? Does it feel like pulling teeth, or is it they're working hard, and is there homework, or is it just pretty much they're in class with the teachers and then they come home and it's over? Or what's the general kind of style of learning there, Chinese, in and out of class?
They've played around with it ever since since they've started. When my youngest was in first grade, they were really big about learning different, at least 20 characters during that year. They've kind of pulled away and they've trying to focus more on reading the Chinese in books. But the kids most in my second graders class, I would say 3/4 of the kids have an older sibling that have been in the Chinese program now. And I see the younger kids in that class, more willing to put the time and effort into the Chinese language, and they're more willing to talk to each other in Chinese. Whereas when my daughter started, most of the kids in her class were the oldest or the only child, and parents didn't speak Chinese at home. And so they didn't really want to talk to each other very much because they were all afraid of saying the wrong things.
So you're seeing older, younger, kind of mixing with Chinese, and that kind of creates more opportunities to speak and practice. And that's at home mostly, or is it even beyond home, like friends getting together a little bit? Or
yeah, friends, a lot of friends get together. I know both of my kids' friends groups, even the youngest ones, they like to just try and say a few words in front of parents, and so that because the parents don't understand, and they just think it's great that they can say things that their parents don't understand. And then as siblings get into it, my daughters like to sit there and have a conversation in front of me in the car, and they'll laugh, and I'm all, what did you guys just say? And it's just encouraging them to interact with each other, and it's fun to see that.
yeah, like having a private language kind of is exciting for them. What about homework? I mean, do they do a lot of work outside of class at home? Like, are there tapes and books, or things they're listening to, or is it pretty much just in class? How does that work?
So they do a book it's called Mandarin Matrix. It's a program that the University of Utah developed, and they have books and they read it, and it's the kids can record their voice at some point. They ask questions. They have to read it. They have to, and then they get graded on how they read it out loud to their teacher. And then they get one sheet of Chinese homework per week, not just every day. It's per week. They give it to them on Thursday, and then they have the weekend to work on it and bring it in on Monday. And right now, that's the only Chinese homework that they get. If they don't finish something, then individual kids might have more because they didn't finish it at home. But they don't have a lot of extra homework on top of their other homework.
I'd say, what's your sense on how they're doing? Like in terms of the level, are they progressing kind of like you'd hoped? I mean, maybe it's hard to measure that, but say in terms of reading, would they do reading on their own at home in books in Chinese, or it would be too hard, or you don't have the books? Or I'm just wondering how satisfied you are with how well they're doing given the time that they're spending in class. I don't know if you have any opinions on that. Just curious.
I think they're really good. My girls, they don't open up the Chinese books that often at home.
So you've got Chinese books maybe that you got, or you borrow them from the school, or I know it's hard to get because I'm trying to find some for my kids and it's not easy to get them. So
yeah, I bought when my daughter was in second grade. I bought a big series of the Chinese books. You can buy them through the University of Utah, but they're really expensive. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to have 2 kids in there. I'm going to put the money into it. And so I do have them read the Chinese book to each other, maybe, I'd say maybe once a week at night. And they really progress well. The one thing I did like about Delaware is Delaware Chinese Immersion program focused more on talking, understanding how to talk, whereas I feel like the Utah immersion program focuses more on the writing and the reading. And I asked my 6th grader the other day, what did you really like in Delaware that they don't do here? And she said, the Chinese teachers in Delaware, when they could tell the kids were getting frustrated, they would stop their lesson and say, all right, we're going to have a 10-minute break, and I want you guys to talk to each other. And they would just talk to each other in Chinese and have a nice break. And then they would start up the lesson again. And they don't do that here in Utah so much. They just kind of steam forward.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people here, are interested in how it worked in Delaware. Was it 50-50? You said they started in kindergarten. Um, how did they do things differently? Like some places I know they try to get half native or heritage students, and then who are kind of speakers, and then they try to get the other half who are completely new and have them share across. How is it different structured? And some schools are 90-10, like they start 90% in Chinese and then gradually move to 50-50 by 5th or 6th grade. But there it was 50. How did it work? And
yeah, it was 50-50, and all the Chinese teachers there had actually come to Utah to get training. And so most of the country kind of looks at Utah as the first ones to really get this started. And so every other year, a lot of the Chinese teachers come here and they get training from the Confucius institution, and they come and they spend a couple of weeks here in Utah. So all of them are like, we've been to Utah, we know Utah. We went down to Zion and we just loved it. And so it was pretty similar here. They were a little more flexible. So one thing I would love to see if University of Utah could do this is in the University of Delaware, they had a program, a partner program with China, and they would bring families here for a year, and the parents could attend the university and take English classes or history classes, and their kids were then enrolled in the Chinese Immersion classes for a year. And so these kids brought language. A lot of them started out, they didn't speak any English, so the kids, in order to play with the kids, they had to speak to them in Chinese. And they gave us a better picture of what school was like in China. Most of the parents at the end of the year would say, my kids don't want to go back to China. They've had so much fun here, because in a lot of schools in China, they don't have recess, they don't have class parties. It's there, it's very strict, and you go home and you have several hours of homework and you come back and repeat. So a lot of the parents that I talked to said, I'm so afraid my kids are going to be so sad, because they love making friends here. Here in the schools here, they've been able to make friends, and in a lot of the Chinese schools, they're so strict, they don't have a lot of time to make friends.
yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, it makes me think that might be a possible direction, would be to try to bring some Chinese students here for a half year or a year and have them be integrated with our kids. Because I think one of the things we miss is we don't really have a lot of an ethnic Chinese population to draw on here. And
Yeah.
to have that interaction and make friendship and be able to speak, and they'd probably be learning English too, but that might be a way to help us get a little more opportunities to use Chinese.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great opportunity for Utah to do that, to maybe look, call University of Delaware and say, how is this program set up? Because it was a federally funded program. And
Right.
so the people came, their housing was paid for, they were paid several college credits, whatever amount they wanted was paid for too. It was more of a, let's try this ambassadorship and try and get friendships and stop being enemies.
Right.
But another thing that I liked in Delaware, and I don't know if some of the other schools do this, but 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade would take a day up and drive up to Philly and spend the day in Chinatown. And the kids had to do 3 things during the day. They had to order lunch in Chinese. They had to buy a souvenir, a $5 or less souvenir, and then they had to go to the market and tell what kind of fish was in the market that day, because the market is very different than what we see. And it was like, my kids just came back and were so excited, because I brought my youngest one, because I was one of the chaperones. So I said, can I please bring my kindergartner? And they said, yeah. And they had so much fun seeing how different just the market was, and then being able to communicate with native speaking Chinese speakers.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we've talked about that a little bit. Like, say maybe this summer it's not going to be possible to go to China, but maybe going to Chinatown in LA and spending a couple of days, having some classes, going to the markets, restaurants, supermarkets, trying to have the kids see, because Chinese it's like China there in a lot of places. I mean, really. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities to do things like that here, and it kind of helps the kids get a sense for why they're studying, right? They actually use it. So
yeah, because my kids, they get excited for Chinese when we use it. We went on a cruise a couple of years ago, and it was a Disney cruise, and we were sitting next to a Chinese family. And so my kids, I said, just introduce yourself in Chinese. You can both at least say that. And they were so excited. But then they had a couple little kids that were in, kindergarten, probably second grade, and they were a little bit scared, and their mom just laughed and said they've never seen blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids speaking Chinese to them. So it is a little bit scary to them. So then my girls started singing one of the Chinese songs that they had learned in school, and the little kids' eyes just lit up. And they started singing the exact same song, and they became friends during that cruise. And it was,
Yeah.
and so my kids said, you know what, this is actually a great thing to have this language.
Yeah, I mean, little wins like that can give them incentive to study and feel like it's worthwhile, that they're using it. Because I think sometimes they don't ever get a chance to use it, right? And
Yep.
those opportunities are things we could try to work on as parents, maybe a little bit. Cal, say in terms of parents at Calvin Smith, is there a communication? Like, I know some elementary schools have a Facebook page just for parents who are in immersion, or is it just informal networks from friends? How do you communicate with other parents who have kids in Chinese DLI at Calvin Smith?
We have a lot. So we have our school website, and they communicate to everyone, but then each grade has their own Facebook page, and that's kind of controlled by the parents, and the parents, they can plan parties, they can plan, sometimes, like my oldest one, people were looking for Chinese tutors, especially when the school shut down last year. They said, hey, are there at least any older kids that want to tutor? And I told my oldest and both of them, I said, when you guys get older in the junior high, you could start making some money and tutoring the younger kids. Sure. In the Chinese program.
And so each grade, so you would be in 2 Facebook groups for 2nd and 6th at Calvin Smith. And
yes.
Wow, that's great. And who did that? I mean, how it's just kind of a tradition at Calvin Smith? I haven't heard that. I've heard of a school-wide Facebook, right? But not one for each grade. So what's the history of that? Do you know?
I think it just started with the first group of parents that said, you know what, we want this to succeed. The parent community here is very good at backing up the Chinese program. Like my nephew, they stopped their immersion program, the Spanish immersion program, because they weren't getting the parent support. But here, a lot of the parents are willing to keep the kids in through the years in elementary, and to keep them going, and to make the friendship so that they can use their Chinese and make it a part of their life.
Sure. What are you hearing about middle school? So your daughter is going to be going to middle school. Which middle school does Calvin Smith feed to?
She'll be going into Bennion.
Bennion. And what are you hearing about what happens there, and what are you hoping, how will things work out, do you think?
Well, they've gone through 2 or 3 of the Chinese teachers, so it's a different one. The first one, I think people really liked, but she was only there for a year, and then they got a male teacher, and a lot of people didn't really had some issues with them. But this new female teacher has been there for a year, maybe 2. Right. And most of the kids have really liked the culture class. The language class is a lot harder, and a lot of the kids get kind of discouraged because it's much more strict on their writing and their reading, and it takes them a little while to realize, okay, now we're working towards the AP test, so it is going to be harder. But most of the kids that take the culture class have really enjoyed it. At Bennion, they have an alternative to take the culture class for an entire year, or just a semester, or not at all. But the language one is required all 3 years in middle school.
Right. So I think some people are concerned there's going to be less time in class. And also, is it an AB schedule there, or it's every day they'll have Chinese?
It's every day. So they'll have Chinese for 45, at least for 45 minutes.
Right, so they can keep it going. Would you be in favor, if we were able to work it out? I don't know if this is way off the charts, but like to get half days in junior high, what do you think parent feeling is towards that sort of an initiative? To get math in Chinese in junior high, or maybe it's good to mix with the other kids and one class is enough. Yeah. Or 1.5. You get the culture class, right, for a half year and language for a year.
What I would like to see them have an AB schedule at junior high, because I was a teacher at a junior high here and a high school for a while, but we didn't have an immersion program when I was teaching. And the immersion kids, a lot of them kind of feel like they don't get the opportunity to take a lot of the art classes or, you know, band or orchestra because their electives are being eaten up by the
Right.
Chinese culture and the Chinese classes. And so if we gave them just one more period, they could take a ceramics class or an art class and still take the Chinese language class and culture class.
So you're saying give them one more period. You mean like add a period to the day, or you mean just maybe, because what people are talking about is if you take the language arts and put it into Chinese, and then maybe you wouldn't have to take the English class, something like that. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking more of having like an A-B schedule. So instead of having 7 periods, they now have 8.
I see. Okay.
So, but it would be kind of fun to see if they could do like an art class in Chinese
Right.
instead. So that would be, I think that my kids would actually love it.
Yeah. Well, and that might be possible outside of school, as an extracurricular, if there's enough density, because I think, where you are, Calvin Smith, all the way down to, where Jordan District starts, and even Alpine, like there's maybe driving distance to put something together like extracurricular, but it may be too difficult logistically to work out. Plans. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So I do wish that there was a bigger Chinese community center. Like most of the bigger cities, they have a Chinese community center that on the weekends, in Delaware, we could go and take ceramics, and it was all taught in Chinese, and the whole family could take it together, and you learned it in Chinese. Or there was art classes, there was dance class in Chinese, and so as a family, and here in Utah, we don't have that yet, and I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it might be Taylorsville, because Taylorsville there's quite a bit of a heritage community there, right? Compared to other places in Utah. I mean, that might be a place where there's a lot of culture to draw from, a lot of great restaurants and stuff there.
Yes. Yeah, and Taylorsville is opening up a new community center. That might be something that the Granite School District and Jordan District can say, hey, could we use some of that as a Chinese community center?
Right. Yeah, I see libraries in other cities where they have like a Chinese story time, different programs like that, and maybe more books that are available. So there's maybe a crossover between the city and the library community and schools that could work out. What highs and lows for you with the program?
Well, I would say, especially to parents, I would say don't give up. I said that the kids, it usually takes them to about 3rd grade for them to really start to understand enough in the classroom to not be frustrated. Both of my kids get kind of frustrated because they want to understand everything, but they're not there yet. But once 3rd grade hits, it's like they just blossom and bloom and they go full steam ahead. So I'm telling my 2nd grader, who is actually a little bit ahead than the rest of her class because she had an extra year in Delaware. She's gotten a little bit bored and like, oh, I've already learned all these Chinese words. I'm sorry. Well, now you can memorize them and make sure and help your neighbors. But she's starting to get to that point where she's understanding more in her class. And so I think that's the biggest part for parents, is to just hang on, wait till 3rd grade, middle of 3rd grade, and that's when they really start to pick things up and it starts connecting. And so, but 1st and 2nd grade is a lot of tears of why am I in this? I don't understand it. Why are you making me do this? But it takes them about 3 years, and then they realize that this is a good thing.
Yeah, kind of like tennis, maybe hard at first, and then once you get to a certain level, then it's a lot more fun, maybe, huh? So,
Yep.
In terms of the future for your kids, I mean, do you think Chinese is going to be a big part of it, or not sure?
Yeah. So my husband and I our goal is when my youngest gets a little bit older, we're going to spend a lot of summer in China, doing medical missions. And so my kids will be helping. My husband is a pediatric dentist, and so he also fixes the cleft palates.
Wow, that's great.
So we're planning on going and spending like a month in China with the hospitals that in Delaware and here in Utah, and working on cleft lips and giving a lot of the Chinese people who've never seen a dentist at all. And so my girls are going to play a key part in being translators, in helping us just be ambassadors to China.
is that something you're planning for this summer, or is it going to have to wait with COVID, or it's up in the air, or it'll be
Yeah,
down the road? Yeah.
they're not doing anything this year. It'll probably be at least another couple of years. They're pretty strict right now in their letting people go, and they probably will be strict again next summer. So probably in 2 years, we're going to go with the medical group that we've gone to Haiti with a lot, and we go to Haiti. They go to Haiti every summer. They're allowed to go back this summer. But that same group, we're going to take over to China, and they've they have done a couple missions in China already, but my kids are too young for that, and so they go to really the outskirts of China, and so they get to stay at these places that are like untouched. By very few people have seen it, and they just have a good experience, and they're very welcomed. The Chinese government really welcomes them in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, to be able to, provide a service and kind of NGO approach and connect with communities that are outside of the big cities that's a great experience for the kids. That's awesome.
Yeah, and once we do it a year, we want to kind of let neighbors kind of come and do and say, hey, if this is great for community outreach. It's great for scholarship applications and college applications to have your kids come and do it.
Yeah.
So that's our end goal, is to kind of help the community here in Utah get over there and help, whether they're nurses, doctors, or just helping with paperwork.
Right. That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, as the Parents Network here, it could be interesting to find opportunities like that and share. You just communicate across and let people see what's out there. And then, other kids who want to do internships, there might be more things to follow on with that. Getting kids in China, I think, is really important, to make all the connections really come around. Thanks so much. I mean, you've given us a ton of information, and there's a lot more. Probably we'll come back and revisit in different ways. But wow, that's really informative, and appreciate all you've shared. So we'll maybe put a pause on here, and then just we'll continue connecting through the group. But thanks so much, Emily, and we'll be in touch.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.